In this video, we will be recording the steps necessary for completing the fee input screen. First, the user should confirm that the settlement providers has been completed prior to entering this screen. Once the user clicks on fee input, the user will notice that certain items are highlighted in red. This means that the item requires an entry before being able to finalize the fee input screen. Starting with the scheduled closing date, the user will select an estimated closing date based on the transaction. In the event that this loan was a purchase transaction, the user should use the close of escrow. For this example, we will select August 31st. Notice that the system will auto-calculate the estimated first payment date and thus the estimated per diem interest. Moving on to the loan origination cost, the user will notice a loan origination fee. The reason is because this loan was selected as a borrower-paid compensation loan. Here, the user will enter the amount and notice that the system automatically calculates it over to dollars. In the event that the user had an in-house processor that needed to be paid through the transaction, the user is able to use this line item and enter the amount that needs to be paid out. Moving on to services you cannot shop for, the user will notice that an appraisal fee is required and also a credit report fee. Notice that the vendor has been pre-selected based on the entry made in the settlement provider screen. Here, the user is able to enter the amount for the appraisal that needs to be paid out to the AMC, and the user is able to freehand who is the vendor for the credit report. The user is then able to move on to services you can shop for. Notice that this section requires two entries, settlement agent fee and lender's title policy. Here, the user will make the entries necessary. It is important to note that prior to completing this section, the user should speak with the title company to make sure that they have the necessary fees and information prior to completing this form. Moving on, if the user does not see a line item that needs to be completed, the user is able to click on Add Fee and thus make a selection from the additional fees that can be selected. In this case, we will select a copy or fax fee. The user should confirm who is the settlement provider that needs to be paid out and enter the amount that needs to be paid out for that specific line item. Moving on to section E, the user will notice that a deed needs to be entered and also a mortgage deed of trust. Here, the user will enter the amounts for each line item. Moving on, the user will notice the prepaids as well as the impound account. And finally, arriving at the total closing cost. Here, the user will confirm and make sure that the amounts are correct, and if there are any lender credits attached to the transaction from the selections made in the pricing screen, that they are entered in this section. Finally, the user will click Finalize Fee to finalize the fee input screen. The user will know that this attestation becomes available. The user needs to make an entry on each section and confirm that these are correct. Upon making the selection, the attest button becomes available. The user will then notice that the system has completed and has been updated. From here, the user is able to now submit the loan. Thank you for watching this video. Please contact your account executive if you have any further questions.